What is up, Waffle Gang? My name is Mark, and today we're covering some more r/am I the butthole. If you'd like to skip the initial waffle, timestamps are in the description and along the timeline below. But if you are new here, please consider hitting that like, that subscribe, and maybe that notification bell too, as it all really helps out our channel. Now, just a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart. For some reason I'm moving away from the microphone while I'm saying it. Thank you so much for what you do, for your support to the channel, and just for being here today. Really does mean the world to me. And let's just crack on with today's story, shall we? And today we're going to be covering stories all with updates. So I do apologize if I've read the actual stories before, but we're going to be following up with updates as well. Get over it. Sassy. Let's go. So this story was from a throwaway account that's called, "Am I the arsehole for trying to send my deaf daughter to school that won't hire an interpreter?" So my 34 female daughter, 6 female, is deaf. We adopted her 3 years ago from China. When she first came home, we tried to teach her both sign and speech, but it was clear ASL was the best form of communication for her. We hadn't put her in preschool because she didn't have much communication, but she started kindergarten this year. There is a private school that all my other kids and sisters' kids go to. She had to take a test to get in and pass, but they said because there was a deaf school within an hour of where we live, they wouldn't provide any accommodations. So either we have to pay for an interpreter or send her to the deaf school. But the deaf school we live near is only for children with hearing aids and CIs, and actually bans sign language. I think speech can definitely help deaf children, but it depends on the individual child. Some speak, some sign, some do both. But my daughter communicates best with sign language, which is why we don't want to send her there. Since this is a private school, I don't think they have to follow the disability guidelines that public schools do. Currently my daughter's doing online school at a local public school who have provided an interpreter, but the education there is horrible. I sent my oldest son there in kindergarten and first grade, and he never learned anything. I'm aware that you don't learn much in kindergarten at first grade, but they didn't even teach them how to read. I had to do that myself. Another reason I want to send her to private school is because from pre-K and up, the kids can choose to learn ASL, Spanish or French, so she may be able to communicate with some other kids there. She had a few play dates with other kids in the area who go there and took ASL, and they were able to communicate pretty well, whereas in public school she would be completely isolated and only be able to communicate with an interpreter. I've been constantly emailing with this private school to try and see if there's any other way to get my daughter in without having to pay for an interpreter myself. My brother thinks that if the school doesn't want her, why should I keep pushing for her to get in? But I just want the best education possible for my daughter, and I want my daughter to be able to be social and make friends. Am I the arsehole? Should I just let it go and keep her in public school, or should I keep trying to get my daughter into this school? Now, as some of you know on this channel, I have quite a few teacher friends around me and family members too. And as far as I'm aware, they still, even if it is a private school, they still have to accommodate people if they want them to come to that school. So they do have to supply help to that child. And I just looked it up on Google as well, and I believe it's called Americans with Disability Act regulations that they have to follow. So I think you do have a leg to stand on here, but I'm sure the update is going to give us a little bit of help here. So we're going to move to the update straight away to see what it says. So the update says, "Thank you all for your advice on my last post. I wasn't aware of all the laws about this kind of thing. For those of you who didn't read, the OP basically, my 6-year-old daughter is deaf and communicates using ASL. There is a public school near us, but it's very bad, and the whole district has a rating of 1.5 out of 5 stars. All our other children go to private school near us, but the private school said they wouldn't pay for an interpreter because there is a deaf school in our county, but the deaf school only teaches speech and no sign language, so we decided not to send her there. We also wanted her to go to private school because there was a language option for ASL, so she may be able to communicate with other classmates. But my brother said we shouldn't push trying to get her in. If the school doesn't want her, we should just give up. Most people said hire a lawyer. My husband decided to contact his brother, who is a disability lawyer, although he specialises in wheelchair accessibility. He was willing to take our case. We discussed the situation over the phone with him, and then he reached out to the private school. He emailed back and forth with the school. We're not sure what was said exactly, but by the end of it, not only did the school agree to pay for the interpreter, but they also provided a free scholarship and let us request which teacher she had, which they didn't let us do for any of our other kids. There is a kindergarten teacher who knows some ASL, so we chose to be in her class. I'm not sure exactly why they did this, but I think it's probably because denying entry to a kindergartner just because she's deaf would not look good if other people found out, but I'm not complaining. She started 2 weeks ago and she loves it. They are doing hybrid. She is able to make friends and talk to other kids. They're in kind of broken sign language. Her interpreter is very nice and will update us on how she did every day, unlike the interpreter she had when she was in public school. Her teacher also tried to sign when she's speaking as much as possible, and so do some of the kids. Overall, I'm so happy this happened, and I wouldn't have known there was anything I could do about it until I asked on here. So thank you all who replied to the OP and told me they do have to provide an interpreter for her. And I think to end this one, it was just a win all around, and I love a little wholesome post once in a while. You know, with Am I the Arsehole post, a majority of the time there's something bad that's always going down. I think this ended in the best possible way, and I think that the school was sort of backtracking like OP said in this story, because it would reflect badly if this sort of information did get out. But what do you think of this story? Obviously a wholesome one, but we're going to move straight on because I don't think we need any other further comments on this one, right? So we're going to move straight on to the next story. Now this story I have read in the past, so feel free to skip straight to the update on this one if you feel like it, but I feel like I should read it again just for people that haven't heard of it before, and I think it's a good catch up on this update, seeing as the title story as well. So here we go. Would I be the arsehole for reporting the co-worker to HR for trying to feed me? And it's a spicy one, so buckle in. I, 24 male, am a small man, 5'4" and 103 pounds as of my last physical. I'm well aware I'm at an unhealthy weight. My entire life I've been small, mostly due to illness and a myriad of allergies, and it's admittedly a sore spot. I'm working with my doctor to gain weight while still fitting in with my dietary restrictions. No meat, dairy, gluten or nuts, and honestly I'm so much better than I was several months ago, and proud of myself for the progress I've made. A co-worker, Peg, 30 female, got pregnant and recently returned to work late November. She'd been increasingly overt and uncomfortable in her concern for me. Peg made and brought in cupcakes for her return, and when I thanked her for thinking of us but refused, citing my gluten allergy, she was visibly upset. She didn't shout or complain much, just sighed heavily and said that she would put this one in the break room with the rest. I felt awful. Then she brought me a steak sandwich the next day on gluten-free bread. Again I thanked her, but I brought in my own lunch and needed to focus on that. Peg told me that it was in the fridge for when I finished. Ended up bringing it home so she wouldn't feel bad and gave it to my boyfriend. Next day she approached again. I refused again. She insisted. By now we weren't alone in the break room. She joked that it was rude to refuse a home cooked meal in favour of that, my lunch. At that point I just took it and thanked her. Boyfriend ended up eating it. Then she just started leaving bag snacks on my desk. She would approach with a snack or a portion of whatever she made for dinner the night before, and not leave me be until I had taken it. I went to her boss and explained that I felt uncomfortable and was told that she was probably feeling maternal and it would negatively impact morale to discourage her. So been taking notes since then. What days Peg has given what, when, who witnessed it, etc. From 12th of the 8th to now she'd done it 23 times. Yesterday I took Peg aside and explained that while I was touched I would appreciate if she wouldn't bring in anything else. She said that I should have said something sooner. She was only trying to help. Have I seen myself in the mirror? Does your boyfriend like you starving yourself? Among other phrases. Livid, I told her that maybe I didn't feel like sharing my personal medical history with her, just so that my wishes were respected. For God's sake, we work in a hospital, don't you know anything about HIPAA? We parted from there, me childishly storming off and her in tears. Have I already been a huge ass, and would a report to HR just be the icing on the arse cake? Now this, all the comments and everything in my opinion as well, was this person was hugely overstepping boundaries. Sure, they might have been trying to be polite at first, but they was told multiple times basically to back off, and they didn't do that. So absolutely you had to go further. You don't have to give your personal medical information to anyone, and that's how a lot of the comments went. But let's move straight to the update to see what that says, because I am going to be fascinated about this one. So update, would I be the arsehole for reporting a co-worker for feeding me? I went to HR saying that the matter was settled, but I wanted it documented. Subsequently was told that there would be an investigation and the incidents would be corroborated with witnesses, because as is the full record I claim is severe enough to warrant potential action for Peg and several other co-workers who were also engaged in her behaviour. HR started the process, apparently immediately, because I walked in yesterday to a shitstorm. This plunged the department into civil war. Many agreed Peg was out of line, some told me I should have kept the status quo. Some said I was ungrateful and entitled. One said I should have handled this maturely, and who could blame her when I look like that? And I should be ashamed of myself. Another co-worker suggested I work from home, another told me he was sorry for not stepping in. I went to go get my lunch out the fridge only to find someone had disposed of it and left behind the empty Tupperware. Nearly everyone has an opinion. The people in my corner have advised me to keep my head down and to take care. My boss held a meeting, first with Peg and me, then second with just me. During the one with Peg, I was told to apologise for my part and Peg likewise. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable by caring about your health. My boss asked if I was satisfied now. I brought up Peg's comments and my boss said I invited them. No one would call that harassment and I need to work on myself. Together we went through each of the 23 events. She excused each of them until I was left to feel like I'd been harassing Peg. The next meeting was even worse. Effectively, boss said, I told you not to retaliate and instead you searched Peg out to harass her, and your actions have expressed a worrying lack of cooperation with me and your team. She was also disappointed that instead of explaining that I needed her to resolve things, I escalated the situation well beyond the point of reason, and cruel to someone who only wanted to help. She said I won't get far in life and I'm not likely to get anywhere vocationally if I can't be a team player and actively sabotage a happy workplace. She hoped I will learn from this teachable moment how to behave in a collaborative environment, as it's inappropriate to involve HR for small misunderstandings. Boyfriend is spitting mad. I'm just tired, confused and hurt. HR seemed sympathetic. Boss is very clearly on Peg's side. The office is split and tense. Currently updating my resume and job searching. It really does feel like a nightmare. Haven't felt good going into work for a while, and this just made it times worse. Holy damn, that workplace is toxic and I cannot believe it got worse for you, then get better. What an absolute shit stain of a boss, man. And I want to see what the comments say because I'm sure they're going to give some great advice on this one. With Terry saying, go see an employment attorney. They are creating a hostile workplace and put out your resume. This place is toxic. And Quixotic Logophile says, your boss is retaliating, which is illegal and is actively creating a hostile workplace. Please report her to HR ASAP. I'd bet money the meetings she called with you aren't sanctioned by HR. Your boss's job is to keep a smoothly run department and instead she's taking sides and making your work life hell. Edit, after reading other comments in the thread, I would add getting a lawyer and documenting everything in addition to going to HR would be a good idea. HR exists to protect the employer. And Miss Done With This Shit says get a lawyer, seriously get a lawyer, your whole company needs to learn how to behave properly because right now, including your boss, they're acting like school children. And Jareed910 says I'd file a report against your boss ASAP. I don't give a fuck what your boss, your co-workers or the CEO thinks. You felt uncomfortable and you asked Peg to stop. Definitely leave if you can. Edit, I understand the role of HR. I understand the report was already filed, but OP has a strong case, in my opinion, against the company right now. So if HR wants to protect the company, it would be in their best interest to fix the situation. This is all assuming that HR is functioning as it should. And Swiggly Bloodlust says, and quote, who can blame her when you look like that? That's like saying a woman should expect harassment because of her breasts. What a bizarrely toxic workplace you have. I'm sorry it turned out like this. If you can afford it, please look into a lawyer specialising in employment cases. And I really hope OP, if they can stomach to go through with it, they actually do go through with it. Workplaces like this shouldn't get away with this toxic mentality of bullshit. It really pisses me off, to be quite honest. Oh, wow. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. And our next story comes from Hotel Bravo. Am I the arsehole for not explicitly telling my grandpa I'm married to another woman? My wife and I are both women in our late 20s. We've been together for 4 years and got married this summer after getting engaged in the spring. Due to restrictions and personal preference, we did a courthouse wedding with each of our sisters as our maids of honour. It was a relatively simple affair and my wife and I are pleased with how low-key it was. Before we got married, I was not out to my extended family members. I was very close with my grandma and was afraid of how she might react. Sadly, she passed away shortly before our wedding, so she never got to know that my wife was more than a friend. I'm not very close to my grandpa, but I do try to call him once a week to chit chat. He's very reserved and soft spoken, so our convos are typically 5 minutes of fluff about work and the weather. I'd introduced my wife to my grandparents. They met her a few times before my grandma passed away. They only knew her as my roommate slash friend, as I wasn't out at the time. But I would tell my grandma about fun things we did together, and honestly I think she might have known that we were a couple. In retrospect, Grandpa probably didn't pick up on it because I'm not nearly as close to him as I was with her, so when we visited, he would say hi and chat with us for a little bit before going in his workshop while we stayed with my grandma in the house. After the wedding, I decided I couldn't hide who I was any longer and posted our wedding pics to social media, saying that we gotten married and I was happy to spend the rest of my life with the woman I loved. Many of my extended family reached out to congratulate us, and the overall response was very positive. For Christmas, we sent out Christmas cards to all my relatives with our engagement and wedding. Fast forward to last week, my parents, siblings, wife and I stopped by to visit my grandpa and exchange presents, with masks on. When we got to his house I said, "Grandpa, you remember wife's name?" and he said hi and asked about her parents, and that was that. Everyone was sitting in a circle around the living room, was sitting next to my wife on the couch with arm on the back of the couch around her, while we went around and everyone opened presents. I got a cookbook that my grandma had picked out for me before she passed, and I started to tear up. My wife held my hand for a while to comfort me. The next day my mum reached out saying that my grandpa didn't know that my wife and I were together until he saw me hanging all over my wife. I'm sure these are my mum's words. I told her that I genuinely thought he knew, and that if someone hadn't talked to him about it after we posted it on social media, he would have realised from other Christmas cards, which featured a close-up of the rings. He asked my mum about it after the party and she had to tell him. She says it should have been from me. My mum told me it was my responsibility to tell him and that he shouldn't have found out that way. Am I the arsehole for not specifically telling my grandpa I'm married to a woman? My mum said it isn't the end of the world, but I can tell she's kind of upset. My wife said that she didn't think any PDA we did have was not over the top and nothing my siblings wouldn't do with their SOs, who weren't present. And a friend said that it's not on me to make sure everyone knows about my marriage. And Neve says, "I think it's a bit weird that you have a weekly call with your granddad and didn't tell him you were married. Regardless of gender of your partner, it must have been weird and uncomfortable for him to not just be told at all that you're married, and then your mum has to tell him yes she's married, she just didn't think to tell you. Slight you're the arsehole. Slight. You don't own any one personal info, but you've maintained a relationship with a family member and essentially told everyone a big piece of news except him. Like if you called him weekly and then turned up with a 6-month-old baby, haven't never mentioned the pregnancy or birth to him, and your mother has to confirm it's your baby. Like you being engaged and then getting married. These are pretty big life events. Yes, you can say that you don't have to tell anyone about your baby, but it's still weird to exclude this info from one person." And Sensitive Ad says, "Hold up, how did you post pictures of your wedding and sending out Christmas cards with wedding and engagement details and a close-up of the rings and not count towards telling your grandfather you got married to a woman? You did inform him. Did he throw the information away without reading it? That's on him, not on you. I actually don't know that it's a requirement to personally sit down every extended family member and look them deep in the eyes and say, 'I'm gay,' in order to tell family members that you're gay. Depending on the size of your family and where they live, that's like a month of driving and personal visits. Not the arsehole." And ToughDog18 says, "I'm going to be different here and say mild you're the arsehole. It's not that you didn't tell your grandfather you were married to a woman, it's that you didn't tell your grandfather you were married at all. I totally get your fear about how people would react. There are two separate issues here. The first is legit, being afraid of people's homophobia. But this isn't what your mum is complaining about. She's complaining about you not telling your grandfather personally and letting her be the one to tell, but not asking her directly. Instead, passive aggressively setting up a situation in which you'd have to tell him and leaving her with it. A general Facebook announcement is most certainly not the same thing as picking up the phone and telling your loved ones you're engaged and are married. You say you talk to your grandfather once a week. It would have been quite natural for you to tell him then. You didn't because you were afraid of his reaction. I get that. However, it's not likely your grandfather would have noticed something announced on social media, and I have to wonder why you thought he did. It's not cool that you went to a family gathering and behaved as a married couple without telling your grandfather you were married. What you should have done, if you were afraid of telling him, again understandable, was ask your mother to tell him for you, or to tell him together with your mother. She would then have given consent. As it is, you just left her with a job without asking her. Anyway, congratulations on your marriage, and hopefully you experience only love and support from now on, and hold your head up high. Now with that, we're going to move straight to the update to see what happens there. So update, am I the arsehole for not explicitly telling my grandpa I'm married to another woman? I just want to thank everyone who commented. I read through them all and it really helped me process the situation. I spoke with my mum a few hours the night after I posted, and she apologised for a comment about my wife and I hanging all over each other. I apologised for putting her in the situation she was in and that I genuinely thought that he had known. She basically said it was okay, he knows now, and not to worry. She had talked to him and told him that we were together but didn't tell him we were married, which she said needed to come from me. I agreed. I said I was going to give him some time to process and reflect on things and that I didn't want to reach out too soon before he was ready. I waited a week to talk to him. In that time, an aunt of mine said she spoke with him. They spoke for a while and his general sentiment was that he was worried we could lead a happy lives together, i.e. could we find a home, could we have kids, would we be able to keep our jobs. She said they had a really good talk, that she was able to reassure him on his worries. She told me I should talk to him and give him a chance to see how happy we are. This weekend I went to visit him. My aunt and mum came with me too. After we chatted for a while, I told Grandpa that I had some news. I told him that my wife and I had actually gotten married this summer. I made it clear that it was a very small ceremony and that our parents couldn't even attend, and that because of that we are planning on having a big wedding celebration in a year or two after COVID is over so all of our family and friends could celebrate. I explained that I was just nervous to tell him and that I was worried what he would think. He said, "Well, I'm 85, my opinion doesn't matter." We talked a little bit more. I made sure to mention that we were very happy and that our jobs knew and our neighbours knew we bought our house. I also mentioned that my wife's parents went to the same college my parents and all my mum's siblings went to, and he thought that was pretty cool. I told him I didn't have a chance to tell my grandma before she passed and I really miss her and I'd hoped she could be happy we were together. We all had a little cry and talked about how much we miss her. The next morning, a different aunt called me and said that she went and visited Grandpa. He was all excited. "Did you hear we're going to have a big party over COVID? Opie is having a wedding celebration." She and I had a good talk and it sounds like Grandpa is doing really well with the news and that everything worked out okay. Oh God, I'm getting so soppy as I get older, man. I'm tearing up just reading that about his excitement about a party. Bloody hell. But what do you guys think of this situation? I think it's a pretty wholesome one and there isn't too much to add on that, and I love a bit of wholesomeness. What about you guys? Let me know in the comments below. Now once again guys, thank you for being here today. I hope you did enjoy these stories with updates. If you do enjoy them, don't forget to let me know because I do everything I do for you. Cheesy. Very nice. Let me know what you guys think. Love to hear it, and I will see you in the next one. Take care guys. Much love.